Adolescence kicks off like your typical teen drama, but it doesn't take long before things take a dark turn.
Dad, I haven't done anything!
We're talking about a tragic crime committed by a kid who's only 13, father struggling to be a man, and a dad in the middle of complete chaos, a family falling apart, a community ripped in two, and one haunting question that keeps coming back. When did everything start to go wrong?
What have you done?
Each episode doesn't just show what happened, it uncovers everything that was ignored along the way. And maybe in the end, the scariest truth is the one nobody wants to admit. Sometimes the real danger is hiding in the place we feel safest. Right from the opening minutes of Adolescence, the tension hits hard. The police storm into the Miller house. They search everything, every corner, every room, until they finally find who they came for. Jamie Miller, a 13-year-old kid. Jamie's being accused of something way too heavy for someone his age. He's a murder suspect.
I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
He doesn't even understand what's going on when the cops hand the arrest warrant straight to his dad. In a cold and calculated move, the police ask the father himself to help convince Jamie to go with them. While they dig through the house looking for evidence, his dad is clearly lost, completely overwhelmed. And outside, a female officer drops the bomb. Eddie Miller's son is being taken in as a suspect in a murder case. And the worst part? Eddie can't get over the fact that they pointed guns at a 13-year-old boy. The shock is instant. Eddie is frozen, barely able to process what he's seeing. And before he can even react, Jamie is already being shoved into the back of a police van. Panicked, Eddie runs after them. He begs his son not to say a word and promises he'll be right behind him, that he won't let him go through this alone.
Hey, me and your mum are gonna follow, okay?
And from the very beginning, one thing becomes clear. There are no cuts. The entire scene is shot as one long, continuous take. And it's not just this episode, it's all 4 of them. You might be thinking, okay, but maybe there are some sneaky hidden cuts, right? But nope, the directors and producers confirmed it themselves. Every single episode was filmed in one single take from start to finish. Back to the storyline, the tension just keeps building. Inside the police van, Jamie starts pounding on the window, yelling that he's innocent. With every hit, you can feel his panic rising. He's just 13, accused of a crime he doesn't even fully understand. And no one seems willing to listen. That's when Officer D.I. Luke Bascom steps in and tells Jamie to stop talking. But it's not cold or aggressive. He actually gets closer and tries to guide him. With a serious tone, he explains that the best shot Jamie has at proving his innocence is staying quiet for now and really listening once they get to the station. Right after that, Luke introduces Jamie to Derek, the appointed legal guardian who's going to stay with him throughout the whole process. But Jamie is still in shock. You can see it in his eyes. He doesn't understand. He doesn't trust anyone, and he's scared. All he wants is to get out of there. Still, both men try to keep him calm on the way to the station. Once they reach the custody unit, the reality of the situation starts to hit Jamie hard. He follows the officer into a small reception area where he's asked a bunch of personal questions. His name, age, address. When they ask who he wants as his legal guardian, he doesn't even hesitate. He asks for his dad and also requests a lawyer.
So because you're a juvenile, you need to be supported by an appropriate adult. Now, would you like that to be one of your parents, or would you like that to be Derek?
Yeah, I'd like my dad, please.
After answering a few health-related questions, Jamie is taken to his holding cell. After all the initial shock, Officer Luke Bascom goes to talk to Jamie's family and give them a bit of an explanation. His tone is calm but firm. He tells them that Jamie asked for a lawyer, which is totally his right, and since the family didn't have a private one ready, the custody unit assigned a public defender to the case. He also explains that Jamie chose his dad, Eddie, to be his legal guardian, which means Eddie will be the one sitting in during interrogations and official procedures. But then comes a tricky part. Luke gives them a heads up. If Jamie said anything to his dad, anything that sounds like a confession, it could end up hurting the case. Because now Eddie is officially part of the legal process. But Eddie doesn't flinch. He looks the officer straight in the eye and says, without a doubt, that his son didn't do anything, that Jamie is innocent, no matter what they say. As soon as Bascom leaves the room, the family is left trying to make sense of everything. The silence breaks when Eddie notices his wife on her phone, and he almost begs her not to tell anyone just yet. They don't even know what's really going on themselves. Right then, a female officer walks by, and Eddie doesn't waste a second. He rushes after her, desperate to know when he'll be allowed to see his son. Meanwhile, inside the station, Bascom is settling in when his colleague Misha walks in. He casually asks if she noticed anything off about Eddie. He admits he's seen a case like this before, where the dad turned out to be doing awful things behind closed doors. But Misha Frank shakes her head.
I had this old case once, right? Young boy. Put it this way. It took us months before we realized what the dad was doing to him, so...
She didn't see anything strange about Eddie. The conversation dies off, unresolved and hanging in the air. Later on, Jamie Miller's official evaluation finally begins. The professionals ask questions, take notes, and watch his every move, but nothing Jamie says or does raises any red flags. No signs of violence, no signs of guilt, no mental health issues, just a scared kid trying to hold it together. After what feels like forever, Jamie's lawyer finally shows up. He walks into the room with a serious yet calm expression and introduces himself as Paul Barlow, the attorney who will be representing Jamie from now on. Wasting no time, Paul jumps straight into explaining what's going to happen next. He says he's still waiting on more details about the case, but promises to keep the family updated every step of the way. He also asks if they have any complaints about how they've been treated so far. But even though everything has been traumatic, nothing they bring up qualifies as a formal complaint. So Paul thanks them and leaves the room. Right after that, he heads into a meeting with the lead investigators on the case, and it's there that the full weight of what's coming really starts to hit him. Paul learns that the incident happened the night before, exactly at 10:13 p.m. The victim died on the scene, and Jamie isn't just being accused of murder, he's also being investigated for weapon possession and intimidation. But there's more. The case is being kept under wraps. Turns out the victim's father hadn't been found or informed yet, so only limited information had been released up to that point. Now, with just a few puzzle pieces on the table, Paul has to start putting it all together. Meanwhile, Jamie is getting ready for another step in the process, this time a visit to the medical ward. But now he's allowed to go with both his dad and his lawyer by his side, and it's not just a routine checkup, it's another intense part of the investigation. It starts with photographs, fingerprinting, and sample collection. But then comes a tough request. They ask for the passwords to his phone and laptop. Jamie refuses. Next up is the blood test, but Jamie admits something. He's terrified of needles. Paul gently warns him if he refuses, it could hurt his case. So Jamie takes a deep breath and agrees to go through with it. But then comes the most sensitive moment so far. The medical team explains that Jamie will need to be fully searched.
Okay then. I'm gonna have to ask you to take your clothes off.
And that means taking off all his clothes. Eddie, the father, immediately refuses. He reminds everyone that his son is just 13 years old.
I'm not too sure about it, mate.
But the medical staff calmly explain why the search is necessary. They need to check for scratches, bruises, or even hidden objects. Eddie keeps resisting until Jamie speaks up and quietly says it's okay. In the end, with Jamie's consent, Eddie agrees, but he doesn't leave his side. He stands there the whole time, watching every second of the search, his eyes filled with pain and helpless anger. Once it's over, the medical team hands Jamie a clean set of clothes and asks him to place the ones he was wearing into a plastic bag, explaining it's just part of collecting more evidence. Then, finally, Jamie gets a moment with his lawyer. The meeting takes place in a private room with his dad by his side. Paul Barlow leads the conversation calmly, starting with simple, almost random questions, just to break the ice. He wants to get to know the kid beyond the accusations, a regular student with favorite subjects, characters he likes, and a daily routine that, up until recently, was as normal as anyone else's. Slowly, Jamie starts to open up, and Paul takes the opportunity to explain what's coming next. His job is to protect Jamie, guide him, and make sure he's ready for questioning. He emphasizes something important, knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. That's the strategy. When it comes to questions about the night of the incident, neutral answers only, no extra comments. Paul runs a quick practice round to make sure Jamie gets it, and when he sees that he does, there's a small sense of relief. Everything seems to be moving in the right direction. He reminds Jamie that his dad, Eddie, will be there through the whole process, and that Jamie has the right to speak up, but only when he feels ready and safe to do so. Before leaving the room, Paul tells both of them to be patient, but once outside, Eddie follows him, clearly shaken and overwhelmed. He doesn't know what to do. He feels completely lost, like he's walking blind through a minefield, doing whatever he can to protect his son. Paul gently reminds him not to interfere with Jamie's answers during the interrogation. As hard as it is, staying silent and letting Jamie speak for himself is the best way to help. He also points out something serious. If the police went as far as requesting a blood test, they're probably working with solid, confidential evidence. Back in the room, Eddie finds himself alone with his son. The silence is heavy. The air feels thick with tension and doubt, and the fear of not knowing the truth eats away at whatever peace he had left. That's when Eddie finally does what he's been holding back for hours. He turns to his son, looks straight into his eyes, hoping to find something. He asks one question, just one. A question loaded with fear, pain, and a desperate hope.
Did you do it?
No.
And when he hears Jamie's answer, he feels a small sense of relief. There are still no guarantees, no solid proof, but something deep inside Eddie wants to believe. If it's true, if his son really is innocent, then the interrogation moves into a new phase. The inspector steps in and announces that from this moment on, everything will be recorded, both audio and video. He says it with the cold, robotic tone of someone who's repeated this line 100 times. But for Jamie, it still feels like a nightmare, one that's just getting started. Then the inspector formally reads Jamie his rights, like that could somehow ease the weight of what's happening. No small talk. The inspector dives straight into the one question everyone's been waiting for. What did Jamie do the night before? But Jamie, sticking to the advice from his lawyer, keeps his cool and answers with a calm, neutral tone. No comment. The response doesn't surprise anyone, but it definitely doesn't satisfy. Realizing he won't get any direct answers, the inspector switches tactics. He softens his tone, going for something more casual, almost friendly. He brings up Jamie's school records, says he was impressed by the kid's grades, how he'd always been an excellent student. But the mood quickly shifts. He adds that the reports also mention a change, a noticeable shift in Jamie's behavior over the past year. Then he tries another angle. He asks Jamie if he has any close friends.
Do you have good friends, Jamie?
Yeah.
Okay, who are your good friends?
No comment.
And just like that, a wall goes up, invisible but solid, built from fear, distrust, maybe even loyalty. Jamie's protecting someone, or himself, or both. That's when the interrogation takes a turn. The inspector warns that the next part of the conversation will focus on Jamie's personal relationships, romantic and sexual. It's a sharp shift in tone, clearly designed to catch Jamie off guard and push for a more emotional, spontaneous reaction. He starts by showing Jamie a few photos of a model, pictures pulled straight from Jamie's social media. According to the records, Jamie had liked and commented on them. Jamie doesn't flinch. He simply says he doesn't know who the model is. He just liked the pictures, the way any other kid his age probably would. Jamie says yes, but refuses to name them. The inspector keeps going, now pulling up a more recent post, one filled with comments made by Jamie. This time it's clear he's trying to dig into Jamie's feelings about girls. Then more images are laid out on the table. Now it's photos of Jamie with two other boys. Jamie quickly identifies them as his friends, Ryan and Tommy.
That's Tommy. That's Ryan.
Okay. Good friends, yeah?
Yeah.
He says they used to hang out and go swimming together, but when the inspector asks if he was with them the night before, Jamie goes silent again. Nothing about that night can be discussed. The frustration on the inspector's face is obvious. He tries another angle, and this time with physical evidence, a photo of a sneaker. He asks if it belongs to Jamie. Jamie looks at it carefully, nods, and says he has the same pair. Might have even been wearing them night. Then comes the most sensitive moment so far. Misha, also part of the investigation, shows Jamie a photo of a girl, Katie Leonard. The name alone changes the entire mood in the room. Jamie says he knows her, but hesitates when asked if they were friends. He looks unsure, almost like he's searching for a memory he doesn't want to find. And then, out of nowhere, Jamie drops a question that shocks everyone. He asks if she's the girl who died.
What is she used dead then?
The energy in the room shifts instantly. The interrogation moves into a deeper, more uncomfortable zone. Now it's all about Jamie's relationship with Katie Leonard. At first, he resists. It's clear he's uncomfortable. He tries to dodge the questions, but eventually admits that they only talked at school. And even then, just casually. According to Jamie, they weren't really close. Not even actual friends. Little by little, the questions get more invasive. They want to know if there was any romantic or sexual involvement between Jamie and Katie. Jamie says no. When they ask if he saw her the night before, again he says no. But then comes something unexpected. Katie's parents had told the police she left home at 8:30 p.m. Jamie's reaction is immediate. He doubles down, says there was no friendship, no connection between them. But the inspector doesn't back down. He reveals that Katie's body was found at 10:30 p.m. in the Crowthers parking lot. But when the paramedics got there, it was already too late. The bleeding couldn't be stopped, and all the signs pointed to her being attacked sometime between 9:30 and 10:30 p.m. That's when the unavoidable question drops. Where was Jamie during that window of time? He stays completely silent. The interrogation had been carefully designed to wear Jamie down, starting with personal topics and only bringing out the strongest evidence later. This is actually a real strategy used in intense criminal investigations. Back to the story, the pressure now shifts to the father. The inspector asks Eddie directly, was Jamie home at that time? Eddie, clearly nervous, says he'd been working the night shift and only got home about 10 minutes before the police broke in. That's when Misha jumps back in. She asks if Jamie had planned to meet up with Katie or if he'd been following her. But Jamie keeps denying any involvement. Then comes the hardest blow. The investigators reveal that Katie was stabbed 7 times in different parts of her body.
Do you know how many times she was stabbed, Jamie?
No.
7 times.
They describe each wound in cold, clinical detail. With every word, Jamie seems to shrink. His shoulders drop, his eyes look away, and he lowers his head. The discomfort is written all over him. Right after that, the lead detective mentions a security camera located in the parking lot. Sensing what's coming, the lawyer steps in and suggests it might be a good time to take a break. But Eddie refuses. He wants to keep going. He truly believes his son is innocent, and if that's true, there's no reason to stop now. The interrogation goes on. Investigators pull footage from different surveillance cameras around the city, all from the night of the murder. In a quick montage, we see Jamie walking with his friends. Then, he says goodbye and walks off alone. At some point, one of the cameras catches Katie on screen, and just seconds later, Jamie shows up in the same shot. The footage clearly suggests he was following her. Jamie looks over at his dad like he's searching for support, but Eddie cuts him off, telling him to just answer the questions. Still, the boy insists he wasn't following Katie. But now, with the footage in front of them, the investigators make it crystal clear sooner or later he's gonna have to talk. Then comes the most devastating part, the actual footage from Crowthers' parking lot. The recording shows the exact moment it all went down. Katie is seen arguing with James, pushing him away, trying to keep her distance. He steps forward, and without a second thought, he lunges, stabbing her again and again, 7 times. The room goes completely silent, except for the quiet sound of Jamie crying. Eddie, standing next to him, doesn't move. He's frozen, completely speechless. That parking lot video hit harder than anything else. For a lot of people watching, Jamie's tears didn't feel like the cries of someone innocent. They felt like guilt catching up to him. The next question hits even harder. How did Jamie make it back home without anyone noticing? He keeps crying, unable to say a word. That's when the investigators drop another bomb. They already know what he did after the murder. He got rid rid of his clothes, but kept the sneakers. Why? Because they were too expensive to throw away, and now they want to understand why. What was going through his mind? They ask if he ever thought about apologizing to the girl's mom. Still, nothing. No words, just tears. At that point, the interrogation ends. The lawyer quietly leaves the room, leaving father and son alone. For a few minutes, Eddie can't even look at Jamie. He pulls away from any kind of touch. The pain hits just like grief, raw and paralyzing. But eventually, their tears pull them closer.
What have you done?
Eddie gives in. He holds Jamie tightly, unsure if he's hugging a victim or someone who made an unforgivable mistake. It's been 3 days since the murder, and just like it happens after tragedies that shake entire communities, the school is now doing everything it can to keep Katie's memory alive. There are tributes everywhere, tearful faces, but the space she left behind feels loud, like her absence echoes through every hallway. That's the scene detectives D. Luke and Mika walk into. The vibe is heavy, a mix of grief and tension, like everyone's walking on eggshells. Meanwhile, down the hall, Tommy and Ryan are having a different kind of conversation, one that feels more urgent than mourning itself. James's silence. He's just vanished, not answering texts, not picking up calls, and that's when things start to spiral. Ryan, clearly anxious, asks if the detectives have already been to James's house. Tommy nods. Yeah, they have. And he doesn't hide his suspicion. He truly believes Jamie might be behind all of this. But what's really messing with Ryan's head is the detail about the murder weapon. The detectives looked into that too. But while Tommy's dad completely lost it when the cops showed up, Ryan's dad said nothing. No reaction, just silence. And sometimes silence says way more than 1,000 words ever could. Across the school, we meet Adam, Detective Di Luke's son. His dad gives him a heads up. He's gonna have to stop by the classroom, but promises not to embarrass him.
Adam, I'm outside your school. Probably gonna have to come into your class, all right? Promise I'll leave you alone.
Maybe Di Luke doesn't even realize what his son goes through in this place. Adam is one of those kids who slips through the cracks, the kind who hides behind lockers and survives each school day like he's crossing a battlefield, and no one seems to notice. Meanwhile, something big is happening. The detectives track down Jade, one of Katie's closest friends. They tell her they stopped by her house, but no one was there, so they came straight to school. They hand her a contact card, introduce themselves as the lead investigators on the case. But Jade, she shuts down. She doesn't want to talk. And the moment Katie's name comes up, everything shifts. At first, Jade tries to dodge it. She deflects, changing the subject to Adam, calling him weird and making it sound like he was the problem. It's a clear attempt to steer away from the pain she's just not ready to face. But the investigators gently steer things back, asking if Katie was happy, if she ever had any kind of relationship with James. On the surface, they sound like simple questions. But for Jade, they hit deep. That's when things take a turn. Her voice rises, her body tenses. She starts to believe the cops are trying to blame Katie for what happened. The wound is still raw, and her pain spills out in the form of anger. To Jade, being asked to talk about her best friend like that, like a case file, feels like betraying her memory, like erasing who Katie was and turning her into just another victim. The room starts to feel heavy. The tension builds. Jade loses her patience, says there's nothing left to say, and begs to leave.
Can I go now, lower school?
Bit of politeness.
Well, I really feeling polite today. Can I go now, Miss Lower School?
Faced with her reaction, the detectives back off and let her go. But deep down, this scene reveals something way more powerful than just a school interview. It shows how grief plays out differently for everyone. Some go quiet, some stay in denial, and some, like Jade, walk that thin line between protecting the memory of someone they loved and breaking under the weight of it. After the interview with Jade, that's when the real investigation at the school begins. A school official gives the green light. The detectives now have access to enter classrooms. And their first stop? James's class, of course. But even before they step inside the classroom, the energy in the air says it all. It's not just grief anymore. It's the weight of rumors, whispers, side eyes in the hallways. The truth is, the students already know more than they should, more than the detectives even imagine. Inside the classroom, the teacher hasn't shown up yet. The delay gives the lead inspector a chance to speak up. Carefully, he explains that even though there's already a suspect in custody, there's still one crucial piece missing in the puzzle: the murder weapon. The knife still hasn't been found, and that's when he makes a plea. If anyone knows anything, no matter how small or unimportant it may seem, speak up, because sometimes the truth hides in the details people overlook. After the announcement, the inspector turns to Mika, his voice lower and more concerned. Without the murder weapon, the whole case is shaky.
If you don't find that knife, he's got a bargaining chip, doesn't he?
Sure, the cameras caught movement, but it was dark, really dark, and any halfway decent lawyer could twist that into reasonable doubt. On top of that, there's still no clear motive, no real reason anyone can point to, and that makes it all harder to hold up in court. Then there's the way Jade reacted earlier. Yes, she was grieving, clearly in pain, but something about her tone felt off, almost too defensive, like she wasn't just protecting Katie's memory, like she was hiding something. And the thing that stuck with the inspector the most, it was the way Jade talked about James. There was a tension in her words, a coldness, almost like Katie hated him. Cut to Adam's classroom, and the vibe is totally different. The inspector and Misha enter, greeting the teacher, who quickly settles the room to make an announcement. But the second he mentions that the inspector is Adam's dad, the class erupts, snickering, eye rolls. Then it gets worse, and some students start making pig noises like they've just been waiting for an excuse to humiliate someone.
All right, that's enough.
I said stop that, Fredo.
The teacher, clearly uncomfortable, shuts it down fast. He tells the class that kind of behavior won't be tolerated, but the inspector, he just lets it slide, doesn't react. Still, he sees it. He finally sees the kind of bullying his son deals with, the kind that leaves no bruises, no scars, but still does damage. The focus shifts back to Katie. Once again, the inspector tries to handle the case with seriousness, but fate just won't play along. A fire alarm suddenly goes off. Chaos erupts. All the students are evacuated and rushed straight to the tennis court. The noise, the shouting, the fast footsteps, it all blends into the deafening sound of the alarm. On the court, surrounded by the crowd, the inspector spots Mr. Mallet and decides to take the chance. He needs answers, anything that might help. He asks about James, his behavior, his grades, if anything seemed off, but the response is kind of empty. The teacher admits he wouldn't really know, simply because he wasn't paying that much attention. Then, out of nowhere, the tension explodes. Jade spots Ryan among the students, and her grief turns into pure rage. She charges at him like she's got nothing left to lose. Punches, kicks, screams. She calls him a murderer, demands to know what he did to Katie. The scene gets so intense that a crowd quickly forms around them. When security finally pulls them apart, Ryan is on the ground, bruised, shaken, completely stunned. They rush him to the nurse's office while the investigators keep a close eye on everything. Even hurt, he's still a person of interest. And the detectives? Yeah, they want to talk to him immediately. In the nurse's office, the vibe is tense, but under control. As soon as they arrive, the inspector politely asks the nurse for some privacy. He and Misha need to talk to Ryan, and they can't wait any longer. Ryan agrees to speak with them. The inspector tries to ease into the conversation. He mentions how wild everything just got and warns Ryan he'll probably end up with a black eye. Ryan, kind of grumpy, says he hopes not. Then the inspector shares an old story, one of those stories everyone has, about the time he actually wanted a black eye to look tougher, but ended up losing a tooth instead. Just trying to break the ice, build a little connection. But it doesn't last long. The vibe shifts when Ryan suddenly asks if the inspector was popular back in high school.
Yeah, you were popular in school, though.
What makes you say that?
No? You were?
And when he hears a simple, yeah, it's like everything clicks for him. Like that one word explains a whole lot. So the inspector cuts to the chase. He needs information, anything that can help piece together the events from the night of the crime. But first he asks if Ryan wants a lawyer or some kind of legal rep present. Ryan says no. And then come the questions. How was Jamie acting that night? Was he sad? Nervous? Ryan answers straight up. Jamie seemed totally normal. He adds that they didn't really have deep convos, never talked about feelings. In his opinion, Jamie and Katie weren't even friends, just acquaintances. He also says he had no clue what Jamie might have been planning. But of course, that kind of answer just brings more questions than answers. And when the inspector brings up one last thing, the murder weapon, everything shifts. Just hearing the word knife sets Ryan off. He panics, stands up, says he can't be there anymore, and then he walks out. No more answers. Meanwhile, Jade is in another room trying to calm down. Her teacher tells her that her mom is on the way. Slowly, Jade starts to let her guard down. She talks about the pain of losing her best friend, the fear of being alone now. Her teacher tries to comfort her, says she's not alone, and even suggests a new therapist, but the suggestion just sounds like more of the same. And Jade snaps again. To her, it's always the same thing. The school just throws therapy at every problem, like that's supposed to erase the pain. Frustrated and angry, she walks out. Somewhere else in the school, Adam is looking for his dad. When he finally finds him, he asks if they can talk in private. This time, not even Misha is there, just the two of them, father and son, sitting in a closed room, holding on to truths that aren't easy to say out loud. Adam takes a while to speak, but when he does, he drops something unexpected. His dad is looking in the wrong place. He's stuck on the obvious evidence, but completely ignoring the subtext, the stuff that lives between the lines on social media.
It's not going well because you're not getting it.
What am I not getting?
You're not reading what they're doing, what's happening.
What are you talking about?
Adam pulls up a comment Katie left on one of James' posts. At first glance, it looks friendly, but she added an emoji, a stick of dynamite. According to Adam, that wasn't just a random emoji. It was actually a red pill. From there, it turns into a whole lesson. Adam explains that this symbol is used by manosphere groups, communities tied to the red pill ideology. The idea is that men have woken up to some twisted truth about women, and now believe they need to act cold, manipulative, even deceitful. He breaks down the so-called 80-20 rule, where 80% of women only go for 20% of the men, leaving the rest ignored and invisible. And then comes the darkest part. The emoji Katie used, according to Adam, was basically saying Jamie would die single, that he was an incel, involuntarily celibate, forever a virgin. And the worst part? A bunch of people liked the comment. In other words, they all agreed. The father tries to make sense of it all, but he's clearly lost. I mean, how could a single emoji mean so much? Adam gets frustrated with his dad's disbelief and tries to explain. Every symbol teens use carries a message. Emojis aren't just cute anymore. They're codes now. He says he could pull up more than 15 messages with different emojis, all just as cruel and loaded. The inspector asks if Katie was the one leading this bullying, but Adam is honest, he doesn't know. He didn't hang out with either of them. He just watched from a distance. When the conversation ends, the inspector walks out of the room, still processing everything. He finds Misha and shares what he just learned. Now they had a motive. Bullying. And not just any bullying, the incel kind. Misha explains to Miss Fenimore what that even means. Involuntary celibacy. A concept pushed by people like Andrew Tate. Those toxic ideas that quietly spread into the minds of lost teenage boys. The two of them part ways and start walking through the school. school. And for the first time, they talk about personal stuff. Misha opens up about how the story always seems to revolve around the criminal. They're the ones who get all the attention. But DeLuke doesn't agree. To him, it's about the victim. It's about figuring out what led to the tragedy. That's when he decides he needs to talk to Ryan again. He heads to Mr. Malick's classroom, and right at that moment, Ryan's trying to escape through the window. The inspector runs after him. The chase doesn't last long. When DeLuke finally catches up, he doesn't waste time. He goes straight to the point, asks about the knife. Ryan tries to dodge the question again, playing dumb. But this time, the inspector pushes harder. He's done playing nice. And that's when, for the first time, Ryan breaks. He says the knife was his.
It was my knife. I just wanted things the way they were. I thought it'd just scare her.
The revelation changes everything. When asked where the knife is, Ryan just keeps repeating that he doesn't know. Says he has no clue where it could be. And that's enough for DeLuke to make a decision. Ryan is now officially a suspect, as an accomplice. He arrests him right then and there. He asks Mika to stay with the boy and handle the legal process. She's in charge of notifying the right people and also of formally charging James. Meanwhile, DeLuke has one last thing to take care of, but it's nothing urgent. Just a moment, breath, a pause to make sense of everything that's happened. But as he steps outside and sees his son walking out of school, he makes a simple choice. He asks him to go grab some fries together, hoping that maybe, just maybe, by reconnecting with his son, he can keep something bad from happening to him too. Now that he knows what school is really like, the pressure, the cruelty, even the silent bullying his own kid has been dealing with, he doesn't want to stay distant anymore. 7 months have passed. Time moved on, but the questions never really left. And now, a new figure steps into the picture. A psychologist sent to evaluate Jamie at the facility where he's been staying since the incident. As soon as she arrives, she's greeted by the facility's security guard. The first thing she asks for is access to the security footage. She wants to understand exactly what went down during some recent incidents inside the institution. The guard, a little hesitant, shows her the tapes. She watches a fight involving James. Then, without holding back, he questions her. Why would she need 5 sessions when the previous psychologist only needed 3 to write his report? But her response is sharp and clear. She's not here to be fast. She's here to be accurate. And for that reason, she doesn't want to hear anything about the former professional. This new report needs to come without any outside influence. Before heading to the room to meet James, she pauses, stops by a vending machine and grabs a hot chocolate with marshmallows. When she walks in, she hands the cup to James, and he gives her a genuine smile. Like for a second, he remembers he's still just a kid. She even offers him half of her grilled cheese and pickle sandwich. And then comes this small detail, something that might seem silly at first, but actually says a lot more than it seems. When the psychologist offers Jamie a sandwich with cheese and pickles, 2 things he doesn't like, the gesture goes way beyond just sharing a snack. It's a subtle, almost invisible test, packed with meaning. The idea is simple. Watch how Jamie reacts when he's faced with something he doesn't enjoy. If he accepts the sandwich without saying a word, even though he clearly doesn't like it, that could reveal something deeper, maybe a pattern of submission, of going along with uncomfortable situations without pushing back, like he's used to swallowing his own feelings, a behavior that often comes from feeling powerless. On the other hand, if he refused, if he made it clear he didn't want it, that would be a sign that there was still something inside him, a need to assert himself, a desire for control. And then comes the moment that says it all. Jamie accepts. No complaints. The conversation starts to flow almost naturally. She brings up his grandparents after he says her voice reminds him of his grandma. Then they talk about his dad, his childhood. And then one word changes the entire tone: masculinity. The psychologist tries to understand how Jamie saw his father, how he perceived the idea of what it means to be a man. For a few minutes, Jamie answers calmly. He even laughs at certain parts, but slowly he starts getting annoyed. He feels like she's twisting things. He makes it clear his dad was a good man, a great man. He starts questioning the purpose of these questions, like it's some kind of psychological trap. But the psychologist stays calm. She says it's not a trick, it's just a conversation. When Jamie asks to see the notes she's writing about him, she says no, and explains that she doesn't work for him. That's when reality kicks in. She reveals that she's an independent professional. She's there to write a pre-sentencing report, a document that will help the judge decide if Jamie fully understands what's happening, if he's aware of the weight of the charges hanging over him. And just like that, the tension starts to rise. She tries to ease the tension, reminding him that last time they talked about his mom, his sister, people who mattered to him, but Jamie shuts it down, says he never mentioned any of that. She pushes back. Yeah, he did. He definitely talked about it. Now she wants to bring up his dad, but first she asks if it's okay to read a few questions she brought. Jamie agrees. When she asks about the recent fight at the institute, Jamie brushes it off like it's no big deal. Just a minor disagreement. Clearly he doesn't want to dig into it. So the therapist switches gears. She hits a deeper nerve. What does it mean to him to be a man?
I'm interested in what being a man feels like. For you.
No answer. Jamie stays quiet. You can tell he's confused. She explains that's exactly why she started with the dad, just to help him figure out where to even begin thinking about this. But Jamie dodges again, goes back to the notes, wants to see what she's been writing down. Once again, she tells him no, because he's not the one in control here. Still, the conversation moves forward. She asks if his dad liked his job. Jamie says yeah, he used to fix toilets, worked hard. Then she asks if anything ever made his dad angry. Jamie admits, sometimes yeah. There was even a time his dad got so mad he tore down an entire shed. He and his sister thought it was kind of funny at the time, but his mom, mom, not so much. She told them both to leave the room. The therapist tries another angle. What did his dad do when he wasn't working? Jamie pulls back a little, starts getting suspicious of her questions, but she explains this isn't about blaming anyone. She just wants to understand how Jamie saw his dad, someone who clearly played a huge role in his life, even being his legal guardian. Jamie says his dad was kind, non-judgmental, and more than anything, someone he looked up to. He shares that his dad was into sports, all kinds, but Jamie, not so much. He never liked sports, was pretty bad at all of them. Then he remembers those Saturday mornings. His dad would take him out to play soccer, and every time Jamie messed up, his dad would turn his head, look away, like he was trying to hide the frustration, pretending he didn't see it, as if he didn't want to show he was disappointed. But Jamie could feel it. He noticed everything. When the therapist asks how he felt seeing his dad embarrassed, Jamie hopes she'll say something comforting.
You're supposed to say he wasn't. You're supposed to say, oh, but it wasn't a shame. But you just thought that, James. Have other people said that to you? It's just the right thing to say.
And that hits Jamie hard, because deep down, he wanted the lie. He wanted the easier version, but at the same time, he also admits he hated lies. The conversation goes on. Bit by bit, Jamie opens up more about his family, but then something catches him off guard. He finds out the therapist had already spoken to his parents. Right away, he wants to know, how's his dad doing? And the answer, even though it's simple, feels heavy. His dad was sad. Sad to see him in that place.
He's okay. It's sad you're here. I can't say more than that.
But that still wasn't enough for James. He wanted more. He wanted to know if the psychologist had any kind of power, if she could get him out of there. The answer? Number. And to him, that made zero sense. Like, why didn't they just send him straight to prison? Why put him in a place that to him felt more like a psych ward? The psychologist tried to explain that it wasn't a prison. It was a youth rehabilitation center, a place designed to teach, to help people rebuild their lives. But James, already full of anger, started questioning what kind of education he was actually getting in there. What kind of lesson was this? Being stuck with people he swore were completely insane while he still saw himself as totally normal. His frustration kept building. The lack of answers just made it worse. The psychologist tried to keep things calm, but James snapped, slammed the table. He yelled, got up.
Look out! Fucking wanna sit down! Do not tell me when to sit down!
That's when a painful thought hit him. Why is Ryan at home waiting for trial in the comfort of his own bed while he's stuck in this place? The psychologist reminded him how serious the case was. He was being accused of a violent crime, but James fired up, shot back, accused, not convicted. That difference, it meant everything to him. And that's when he completely lost it. He told her she didn't control him, that she had no power over his mind. And when she warned she'd end the session if he didn't sit down, he simply agreed. Fine, end it. The guard who'd been listening outside walked in, looking concerned. But James, already regaining control, responded coldly. He just yelled, nothing major. The psychologist excused herself to go get some tea. James, calmer now, even asked if she could bring him another hot chocolate, but then added she didn't have to. While on her break, the psychologist crossed paths with the guard again. She asked to review the camera footage.
Could I look in the room?
There's no audio.
That's fine. Can I look?
Of course.
And for a few minutes, she just watched, in total silence, observing, processing every move James had made. Then she headed back to the room. This time, something shifts. She moves the chair, sits down, and with a firm tone, she says they need to get back to the questions, because the report she's writing is meant to show whether Jamie truly understands the charges against him, if he gets what he did, and what it all means. Now the kid seems different, calmer, more focused. He says he's ready to answer everything, any topic, any question. She remembers the hot chocolate and stands up to go get it, but he stops her, says there's no need, that he yelled at her, and because of that, he doesn't deserve another hot chocolate. The psychologist sits back down and starts again, this time touching on a sensitive subject, masculinity. How Jamie sees his father, especially when it comes to his relationship with Jamie's mom. But that question hits a nerve. It clearly drains him, so she switches it up. Now she wants to know how Jamie feels about women. He answers instantly, says he likes them, and no, he's not gay. When she asks if he'd like to have a girlfriend, he nods. Yes, absolutely. And underneath those simple answers, a truth slowly starts to unfold. Jamie wants to be heard. He wants to be understood. But he also wants to avoid the questions that to him just don't seem fair. Like the psychologist asking about his dad, trying to find signs of abuse. But Jamie keeps trying to make one thing crystal clear. His dad never did anything wrong. Eddie was a good father, a good man. End of story. Then the questions start getting deeper. The psychologist asks if Jamie would like to have a girlfriend, and he's honest. Yeah, he definitely would. That opens the door to a new kind of conversation. She asks what a date would look like. Jamie says he'd take her to the movies. With a few more questions, he adds that he wouldn't take her straight home after the movie. From there, they start talking about boundaries, what's okay and what's not, in a relationship between two 13-year-olds. Jamie says it would be normal to kiss and touch a girl, and when she asks what he means by touch, he explains that intimacy would be expected. After all, they're talking about a couple in a relationship. Then he starts making things up, says he's already touched 2 girls and they touched him too. But when the psychologist asks if he liked it, Jamie freezes. He doesn't know what to say because it's not true. None of it ever happened. The truth? He had only seen the breasts of 2 girls from his class, just like everyone else at school, through some leaked photos. At that moment, the psychologist asks if one of the girls in the photos was Katie. Jamie says yes and admits he felt something. But when she asks if he had a crush on Katie, he says no. Says she was too too straight, just like the rest of the class.
She was quiet, no offense, quite flat, you know. Well, everyone else said it. You saw it. That's not just me. The picture got passed around the school.
Then the conversation shifts to how the photo even got leaked. After that, she circles back again, asks if Jamie feels attracted to girls. He says yes once more, but when she flips the question, asks if girls are attracted to him, Jamie says no. He thinks he's ugly. The psychologist asks how that makes him feel, and that hits a nerve. Not because of the question itself, but because she didn't argue. She didn't say he was wrong. Then she pushes a little further, asks again how it feels to see himself that way. That's when things start to heat up. Jamie snaps back, saying the other psychologist asked way easier questions than she does. Like, way easier. He gives an example. Did you understand what you did? And right then, the exact moment Jamie hears himself say that, everything spirals out of control. His reaction is instant. He jumps up, kicks back his chair, and slams it into the floor with all his strength. The sound echoes through the room. For him, this doesn't feel like a conversation anymore. It feels like a setup. The loud crash brings the guard to the doorway, ready to step in. But the psychologist raises her hand, signaling him to stay back. She wants to handle it on her own. She needs to see how far Jamie will go. And then he gets it. He sees the move. He realizes what she did, and slowly he starts walking toward her, trying to figure it out. Why did she stop him from being protected? Did she think she was in control or something? Like some untouchable queen? He stares at her, dead serious, like he's trying to shake her calm, just with his eyes. Then, in a bold move, he gets super close enough to make her uncomfortable. And just to prove he can, he gives her a little scare. But she holds her ground and calmly asks him to sit down. He doesn't. Instead, he starts pacing back and forth, throwing out insults after every word she says. Still, she doesn't move, just sits there, watching, waiting. And when he finally burns out and sits down, the conversation picks up again. This time, she takes a different route. She brings up what Jamie said in the last session, how he had friends, but was never really popular. He also talked about the bullying, and it wasn't some light teasing. They were tripped, spit on, made fun of. That kind of stuff was just part of their daily life at school. Jamie agrees with everything she said, but the psychologist doesn't want to stay stuck in the past. She wants to understand the now. She asks why he had an Instagram account. The answer comes instantly, because he needed it. It was the only way to keep up with what everyone else was posting. But she pushes further. She points out that he followed a bunch of models, and even though nobody forced him to post anything, he still did. So she asks, were those pictures meant to show he was having fun, hanging out with friends, spending time with family, trying to show he belonged somewhere? Jamie shuts that down right away, says it wasn't like that at all. Then the psychologist brings up Katie, how she used to comment on his posts. Without missing a beat, she grabs her bag and pulls out some screenshots. Comments Katie left. Jamie doesn't even glance, refuses to read a single word. Instead, he tries to deflect, says her face is red, probably because he yelled, then starts getting sarcastic, like, come on, what could be so scary about a 13-year-old? But the psychologist doesn't bite. She brushes it off and keeps going. She asks about the real meaning behind the emojis on his posts. And finally, Jamie gives in. He looks at the comments. When she asks if the bean emojis were just beans, he answers calmly. Katie was sending a message, trying to make it look like he was part of certain communities. That's when Jamie starts explaining. He talks about the incel groups, what they stand for, what they believe in. He explains the twisted logic behind the so-called 80-20 rule, where 80% of women supposedly only go for 20% of men. And then he says, cold as ice, that he believed in all of it too. The psychologist wants to know, did Katie leave comments like that on other kids' posts too? Or was it just Jamie? Jamie says it was just him, that only he got those comments. And when she asks why, the answer hits straight at the heart of James's deepest pain, because he believed he must be really ugly. She asks if he ever confronted Katie, if he tried talking to her, and he says yeah, he did. He told her it wasn't true, that none of it made any sense, and all Katie said was, okay. Then she walked away. And that's when he says something that completely shifts the mood in the room. He says he didn't kill Katie, but then he adds, even if he had a reason to, he still didn't do it. That the only thing he did was, the psychologist doesn't say a word, she just watches him, waiting, knowing something big is coming. But right in that silence, Jamie flips the script, looks at her with this smug, sarcastic grin, and says, half mocking, if she was really sitting there expecting him to confess to something major, it's not just about testing her limits anymore, it's about hiding what hurts the most. The fear that maybe, deep down, he's not the person he always pretended to be. Then something in his face shifts, just for a second. Barely noticeable, but enough to say everything. He drops the sarcasm, the attitude, and what comes out next sounds to him like the real confession. He says that after Katie's photo leaked, he decided to ask her out. He saw it as a chance. Figured that after being humiliated by everyone, she'd be vulnerable enough to say yes. And he thought that made him smart. Like using her pain somehow proved he was clever. He reveals that he invited her to go to the amusement park, but Katie just smiled and said she wasn't that desperate. And after that, the comments began. Her emojis, the subtle digs, the playful teasing that only teenagers seem to understand. It's at this moment Jamie peels back another layer of what's hidden inside. He admits that when he found Katie in the parking lot, he had a knife. Not that he used it, but it was there. And he's quick to emphasize this, that he didn't do anything, even though he could have, even though he was alone with her, even though he had all the power in that moment. Jamie didn't touch Katie. In his mind, that made him better than other guys, because according to him, anyone else would have done it. But he didn't. He restrained himself, and he seemed proud of it, as if the simple fact of not committing a crime was somehow a virtue. Facing the psychologist's silence, who remained still, neither validating nor condemning, simply closely observing Jamie's reaction after that enormous revelation, Jamie stops seeking approval. He picks up the sandwich and starts eating, as if the silence itself said more than any response. Slowly, the weight of what he's revealed starts to sink in. Irritated again, he admits maybe he shouldn't have said anything. He only opened up because he was tired, completely exhausted. The psychologist spots the opening and asks if he truly understands death. If he gets that when someone dies, they never come back, that the life that's lost has no second chances. Then she asks if he understands what homicide means, that he will face judgment, that what's coming next is real and irreversible. Jamie replies yes, he understands it all, and that's when she informs him this was their last session together. She advises him that in the future, if he's ever offered psychological treatment again, he should take it, really take it seriously. It's only when Jamie hears he'll never see her again that he explodes into another wave of anger. But this time it's different. It's a confused kind of desperation. He begins to panic, unable to accept that he'll never see his psychologist again. Before being taken away, Jamie begs for one last chance. Just one. Finally, he's allowed to ask a final question. He wants to know if she liked him, not as a professional, but as a person.
No, we haven't finished.
We have, thank you.
No. Can I ask you something? Yes. Do you like me?
As a human being, but he doesn't get an answer. He tries again. Did she really feel nothing? No sympathy? No affection at all? She calmly explains she was only there as a professional, which makes him even angrier. It reveals how desperately he needed validation from a woman, that all along, all he ever wanted was to be seen, to be liked by someone, especially a woman, even if there was never anything romantic between them. As he's being taken away, his pain shifts into rage, into insults. He starts screaming at her through the windows, pounding on the glass, throwing cruel names into the air. But even amidst the screams and hateful words, that question still hangs there, twisted in anger. Did she really never like him? And yet, as he pounds furiously on the windows, he screams one final request, for her to tell his father that he's okay, that this is what he needs her to say. 13 months have passed, and precisely on Eddie's birthday, the mood at home is far from easygoing. While his wife prepares a special breakfast, Eddie busies himself sorting through the pile of mail accumulated on the table. Among bills and routine letters, one envelope catches his eye. It's from James. Inside, a drawing. Simple, hand-drawn. Eddie, however, doesn't give it much thought. He sets it aside and continues working through the stack of mail, until his daughter appears in the kitchen, wearing a worried expression, bringing with her the question that disrupts the entire morning. Outside, the family van has been vandalized. Eddie urgently asks his wife to call the police again, but it's merely reported as juvenile vandalism. Eddie can't wait. He fills a bucket with soap and water and heads straight to the driveway, frantically scrubbing to erase that word. Meanwhile, his wife tries to talk to him, bringing up the possibility of moving, of starting fresh somewhere new. But Eddie instantly rejects the idea. He refuses to run away. He keeps telling himself he's done nothing wrong. More than that, he doesn't want to sabotage his daughter Lisa's future. She's in college now, her life barely beginning. The problem is, Lisa overhears everything. Quietly, she heads upstairs to her room. Her mom follows. They talk in whispers, away from Eddie's ears. Lisa can't understand. Why would someone spray the word pervert on their van? How could anyone accuse her father or Jamie, who was only 13 at the time? It simply doesn't make sense. Downstairs, Eddie starts getting irritated. He can't find the sponge, can't remove the paint, and his anger grows as stubbornly as the red stain spreading over the metal. Frustrated, he decides they're all going out. They need something stronger, something that actually works. But when Lisa asks to stay home, Eddie's temper flares even more. In the end, though, her mother insists all three of them will go together, hoping it'll ease the tension. Inside the van, Eddie softens his tone. He promises they'll take a little trip after the store, maybe go to the movies. Just an ordinary day, a breath of fresh air. On the drive, they share old stories, teenage memories, their first dance, the weird outfits, laughter long forgotten. Lisa smiles. For the first time in days, she seems to forget what's waiting outside the window. They park in front of the store. Inside, Eddie looks for help. An employee approaches, ready to assist. Eddie starts explaining about paints, removers, methods, but halfway through the explanation, the employee recognizes him. He remembers the Facebook pictures, remembers the case, the girl, the boy, the image that spread online. He says he's on Eddie's side, that he believes James. He starts giving advice, pointing out how the girl's injury looked suspiciously deep, that the bones seemed to be affected, suggesting the story might not be exactly as people are saying. He ends by offering to help organize an online fundraiser if Eddie needs it, to get a decent lawyer. Eddie listens silently, not a single word. He just asks for the paint remover and moves straight to the checkout counter. Lisa finds him shortly after, but he's deaf to whatever she's saying. He's far away, out of it. All he wants is to get out of there. As he approaches the van, something catches Eddie's attention. Across the parking lot, he spots them, the same boys who vandalized his vehicle. His body moves before his mind can process anything clearly. Eddie crosses the distance quickly, grabbing one of the boys by the collar and throwing him to the ground. He lifts him back up, only to shove him down again. Over and over, his rage takes over completely. It's not just about the spray paint, it's about everything that came before. Everything that's piled up day after day, the sideways glances, whispers, the accusations no one ever openly says. Soon, Eddie starts shouting, demanding those boys leave his family alone. When he finally releases the boy, he picks up the kid's bicycle and throws it far away. He storms back to the van, eyes blazing. Before getting inside, he picks up the bucket of paint remover he just bought and pours it out right there in the middle of the parking lot. The scene draws everyone's attention: customers, employees. A security guard steps forward and orders Eddie to clean up the mess, but Eddie stares him down, snapping back at the guard, nearly ready to lunge at him too. Without another glance, he climbs into the van. On the way home, the silence inside the van is suffocating. Nobody says anything. Nobody looks at each other. And in that void, filled only with the sound of the engine and tires on asphalt, Eddie's phone suddenly rings. The name flashing on the screen is one everyone recognizes: James. When Eddie picks up, he hears his son's voice, calmer than expected. James called to wish him a happy birthday. He tries to keep it casual, mentioning the card he drew and sent in the mail. He talks briefly about life at the facility, the daily routine, how slowly time moves. Finally, he asks his dad what he planned to do for his special day. Eddie answers simply: a quiet breakfast at home, then a movie, and to finish off, dinner with Lisa at a Chinese restaurant. Something calm, almost symbolic, a desperate attempt at maintaining some sense of normalcy. But then Jamie's tone shifts. Even knowing this might not be the right moment, Jamie says he needs to tell them something important. With the trial coming up, he's made a decision. He's going to change his plea. He's going to plead guilty. The impact of those words hits instantly. Inside the van, the silence returns, heavier this time, deeper, as if all the air has been sucked out of the space. And the silence is heavy because from the beginning, even after seeing the evidence, the video footage, everything Jamie had done, Eddie had still clung desperately to a tiny spark of hope, a faint belief that Jamie might somehow be innocent or at least redeemable. Eddie had convinced himself Jamie was simply rehabilitating, but now Jamie's decision to plead guilty shatters that fragile hope, making it painfully clear Jamie had truly become the monster everyone feared. To break the unbearable weight, Jamie's mother, who's also on the call, tries to soften things. She talks about food, the gym at the institute, anything to distract, but Jamie seems uncomfortable having his mother and sister there listening. He clearly thought he was speaking privately to his father. Still, he says goodbye, apologizes, and wishes his dad a happy birthday before hanging up.
I'm sorry. And happy birthday.
Back at home, no one feels like going out anymore. The movie is forgotten. Everyone retreats to their own corners. Lisa locks herself in her room. Eddie's wife finds him in absolute silence, standing frozen in their bedroom, as if unsure whether he's angry or just numb from shock. Mrs. Miller softly comments, trying to ease the tension, mentioning that Jamie sounded better than the previous week. Maybe pleading guilty had lifted some burden from him. Maybe, and perhaps accepting the blame truly is the best way forward. Now, an important conversation begins between the couple, as they finally question themselves about the way they raised their son, and what they could have done differently. The conversation deepens, becoming more intimate. Eddie's wife remembers Jamie's routine before everything happened, how he would come home, slam the door, and head straight to his room. He'd spend hours on his computer, sometimes until 1 in the morning. Eddie admits something countless parents have silently wondered, that it's impossible to know exactly what your kid does online. No parent can monitor every click, every hidden tab, every parallel world that opens with a single tap. She gently comments that both Eddie and Jamie have strong tempers. Eddie bristles at the comparison, unwilling to accept that his son might have inherited that trait from him, but she persists. Maybe they missed signs. Maybe they should have noticed earlier and stopped everything from happening. Then Eddie finally shares something he's always kept hidden. He talks about his own childhood, how his father used to beat him, how he promised himself that if he ever had a child, he'd never treat him that way. He wanted to be better, a different kind of dad. But now, in this moment, Eddie wonders if he truly succeeded. His wife tries to ease his guilt. She reminds him they both tried, that in their own way, they were present parents. But Eddie recalls all those times he tried to mold Jamie into something he wasn't. First with soccer, where other kids' parents laughed at Jamie. Then boxing, a failed attempt at making him tougher. But none of that was what Jamie wanted. What Jamie really loved was drawing. He spent hours quietly drawing self-portraits, as if trying to figure out who he was through pencil strokes. Eventually, he asked for a computer, and they gave him one, and the drawings disappeared. Jamie's attention shifted elsewhere. Eddie remembers the video games, the nights spent laughing alongside his son. But gradually, work took over. Eddie became more distant, spent less and less time at home, and because of that, he never suspected a thing. After all, Jamie was in his room, quiet, not bothering anyone. Who could imagine danger could come from behind a screen? They both quietly agree they could have done better. At that moment, Lisa enters the room. She's dressed, ready to go to the movies, but as she sees her parents, their eyes red, the heavy atmosphere, she immediately understands. They mention possibly moving again, but Lisa firmly says she doesn't want to move. To her, running away wouldn't make sense. Wherever they went, someone would always find out. There would always be stares, whispers, rumors, and besides, Jamie was her brother. Nothing could change that. Facing this reality, the three of them decide no cinema today. Instead, they choose something simple at home. While mother and daughter head to the kitchen, Eddie remains behind, alone, and for the first time in months, he enters James's room. The bedroom is exactly the same, untouched, like time froze there. Eddie walks slowly, taking in the old drawings, the books, the objects, everything soaked in memories. Suddenly, something breaks inside him. The pain he'd been shoving down for months surges up uncontrollably. Eddie collapses onto his son's bed and begins to cry. He sobs loudly, angrily, ashamedly, lovingly. He screams into the pillow against time, against himself, against everything. Then, calmer, he carries carefully covers Jamie's teddy bear with an almost sacred tenderness, as if protecting his own son, even absent, even wounded, even guilty. And this final scene is entirely intentional. The series ends exactly where it began, with Eddie, who throughout every episode desperately tried to see his son as innocent, finally forced to accept the painful truth: his son had become a monster, and by destroying one girl's life, Jamie destroyed his own and shattered the lives of everyone around him. Now, Eddie and his family must carry the weight of this reality, along with all the shame, whispers, and judgment for the rest of their lives. Adolescence ends, but the question it raises still echoes clearly. Who's watching over our kids when we assume they're just in their rooms? James's story could easily be dismissed as fiction, but it isn't. It lives in anonymous comments, in messages that go viral, in images that should never have leaked. It thrives in the silent cruelty of cyberbullying, happening right under our noses while everyone pretends not to notice. In the end, James took the blame, but was he really the only one responsible? Or does each of us, who fail to listen, to ask questions, to protect, also share part of that blame? Because in today's world, ignoring what happens behind screens can be just as violent as pulling the trigger.